This is the 20th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, AFTCO, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning. It's early morning, 7 a.m. Central Time, and welcome to a special edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. And boy, have we been talking about bass fishing a lot. Almost a 5-hour episode last night with what I am dubbed the BTL Mega Show. Let's see. Do I have a list here of who all was on? Oh, yeah, I do. With surprise guest Matt Herron, too. That was a welcomed addition. And I like Matt's audio. Like if I was to have like a Matt Herron audio in my head, like just a little bit just a little bit old school, that he brought it. James Hall from Bassmaster is on. Mark Jeffries made an appearance. Chad Clifton from Power Breaks, and then professional anglers Lee Livesey, Jordan Lee, Ben Milliken, Austin Felix, reigning Bassmaster Classic champ Justin Hamner. I actually have Scott's going to be ticked at me today. That's our guest today, Scott Palmer from the Bass Tank. We're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into an industry side of this as the owner of the Bass Tank, who literally relies on electronic sales to make a living. We'll see how this the NPFL ban on forward-facing sonar in 2025 and the bass limitations he thinks will impact or not impact or help or hurt or change the industry, the electronics industry, as far as sales. But anyway, he had given me a Justin Hamner autographed Bass Tank hat, and I thought it was so cool, I just put it up on my display case, and I was supposed to give it away. So we might have to do a giveaway there, because that was definitely one that was going for the fans. But Hamner jumped on, and then also had Randy Blockett on the show, Johnny Schultz from Fish the Moment, and then we wrapped things up. I mentioned Jordan Lee too. Jordan Lee has really become a really good spokesperson for this sport on the angler side, on the industry side. I've said this before when I have him on, and I get him on 3 or 4 times a year. The dude has really stepped up and kind of grown up into a role, I think, as one of the foremost rational voices from the angler side in the sport of professional bass fishing. I would put Polinick in that as well, just as kind of when those guys talk, like a lot of peer respect, a lot of fan respect. And yeah, I mean, maybe in his early years, he might have made a couple industry missteps, but a lot of industry respect too for Jordan Lee. And then Todd Castledine, long time overdue for him to come on BTL. And then we wrapped it up with an hour post-game show. So that ended up at midnight. Replays out there. Appreciate all the feedback. We hit almost 1,500 live, which was a record for BTL, a record long show, a record number of live viewers. But we already had this dialed in with the one and only Scott Palmer from the Bass Tank, who's also got some stuff going on today. Can you say where you're headed today, Scott?
Sure, why not? I am heading to Arkansas to pick up my brand new 2025 Puma STS from Bass Cat directly from the factory. So I'm excited about that for sure.
Nice. What color scheme did you go with?
Man, I went a little bit neutral. I'll call it, like a gunmetal gray with some white. I think the bolt is white with just a few little accents to it. So I think it's going to stand out really, really well. But I've got to resell it in a year. And as much as I loved my blue Cougar that I had from 23, blue, you got to want a blue boat. So I said, hey, let me put this, make it a little more appealing to the masses. But I'll have some pictures, of course. I'm taking my media lady with me today, so we'll get a little video there, and obviously some during the rigging. Obviously, we're going to do some.
You have a media lady?
That standpoint also.
When did you get a media lady?
Listen, if you listen,
I need a
she's
media
been doing
lady.
this with me for a while. Like I can hook you up. She kind of freelances as well, man. Like if you've ever followed my personal social media, like you'll see me post a picture and you're like, oh, that's a good picture. Then every now and again you'll see a picture like, wow, that's a good picture. I didn't do that. That's all her. She's phenomenal. So yeah. So when it comes to stuff like this, I grab her and bring her along. So she's just
Yeah, I
awesome.
have noticed you have been posting a lot more like professional looking pictures. A lot of sunsets with like the
Yeah, that's
strategic
all.
kind of electronics. A lot of you like messing with the settings and stuff. You've been fishing a lot more too.
Yeah, that's all her. It is. I've definitely fished more this year than I did last year. But also, the game. When you go out, you get as much content as you can. So it's just it makes it look like I'm on the water. Even my dad's like, "Hey, do you ever work anymore?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Yeah, I do. But you just try to take advantage of what you can when you're on the water. But I'm definitely fishing a lot more this year, and I hope to fish more next year. Honestly, I'm looking to get back in the little tournament trail.
Oh, there you go. I know
I
one of the
know.
things you're on the water, so I haven't caught up. I haven't talked to Cranford in a couple weeks, but the last time I talked to him, he was super pumped. He was like, dude, I'm going fishing with Scott tomorrow.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, if
Yeah,
he's in your boat, let him do whatever the hell he wants to your units because they're really jacked up right now. And I hadn't followed. Did you
yeah.
guys like? Did you guys smash him?
No, we stared at a lot of fish, and we chased a lot of fish. I took him. We went to a lake that I know very very well, and he was like, "Man, there's some big ones." I'm like, "You have no idea." Cranford's a good fisherman, so of course he can go to any lake and kind of break it down. But we went to a spot that he had found the one time he'd been there. I'm like, all right, now let's go to this spot. Let's go to this spot. And every time we go, we would see big fish there, but they were just in a real negative mood, and it didn't matter what you threw at them or anything like that. They were just being negative. It was high skies, no wind, and that just makes it tough. So now I don't know what he did. I had to go because I had some things. I think I was there till noon, 1 o'clock, and I think he was going to stay for a couple more hours. And I
Did you get
haven't
his
talked to
stuff
him to
dialed
see
in?
if he. Yeah, he was pretty far out, and I showed him a few things and set it up, and I think he was pretty pleased. Cranford's just one of those guys who's just going to go fishing. His
Yeah.
setting's going to be the worst in the world. He's just going to go fishing. So, but I feel like I was like, hey, well, what about this? I'm like, tell me if you don't like this. And so I just started messing around doing what I do. You know me, you're up there trying to fish, and I'm up there screwing with your settings. But and so, but it got it much better setup in my opinion.
Huh. All right, let's get into this. So
Okay.
a lot of stuff has dropped. Like I said, we did the mega show last night. A lot of opinions. Uh, two different leagues, both with over 100 anglers. I've had a representative from both leagues on to talk about the decision. We knew something was coming down the pipe for the past 7 months. The Bass Tech Committee. Let's start with the NPFL. I know in the past, the Bass Tank in past years, which I don't know if you had anything to do with that or whatnot over the past couple of years, but I mean, it was a big sponsor of the NPFL for a number of years because I just remember seeing like the Bass Tank on it. Your thoughts on, let's start with the ban on forward facing sonar in 2025 on the NPFL. Like I said, you are the owner of the Bass Tank, and I'll just do a little screen share here to show for those who have been living under a rock. That is the Bass Tank, and it is all electronics and electronic accessories, transducers, mounts, chart plotters, bundles, batteries, a lot of forward facing sonar related items that you rely on to make a living. Are you freaking out over this? Is it not that big of a deal? How do you think this is going to affect you going forward? I know it's kind of a new reaction, so I don't know how well thought out and your plans are for the future.
Well, this industry, and I think you can relate to this, Matt. There's always something changing in this industry. So this industry is always about change and always about reacting and not overreacting. I think the worst thing I could do right now is freak out. But honestly, I don't see it making a huge impact because at the end of the day, forward-facing sonar is a tool. It would be just like a side imaging transducer from a tool standpoint. Forget about the capabilities. Let's just talk about what it is. It's a tool. And if tomorrow they said, hey, I would freak out more if they said you can't use side imaging, or hey,
Okay.
they're going to completely ban electronics completely. Because at the end of the day, forward-facing sonar is a tool, and guys are still going to go fishing, and you've got to have a unit to run a forward-facing sonar system, period. So, okay, maybe the guys don't need this now. So at the end of the day, I'm not really freaking out all that much because it's not going to affect us a whole lot. It really isn't. It's going to be interesting to see. I've got my personal opinions about it, but that's what they are. They're my personal opinions, and the NPFL made a business decision. That's one thing that I've heard Brad say numerous times is this is a business decision. And, as a business owner, you make decisions sometimes that may not be the most popular, even within your own organization sometimes, but you're looking at the big picture and saying, I feel like this is the direction we need to go. And then time tells, time will be the ultimate tell whether this is the right decision or not. And so I'm real curious to sit back and watch how this plays out, because they are the first to jump out there and actually put just an all-out ban on it. But at the end of the day, my average customer is not an NPFL fisherman. And I'm not throwing shade. I'm just saying my average customer doesn't fish the NPFL. They don't fish the pro tours on the other side as well. And I don't know if this is the time to get into or not, but it's going to be the trickle down effect. That's where, again, me not overreacting right now. When the local clubs, if every local club, local trail, weekend series, whatever you want to call it, banned it, that's where I'll feel an impact. But even then, guys still need electronics. They still need mapping. They still need side imaging. And so you take this tool out and, okay, it's just, we continue on. We don't just sell forward-facing sonar. I'm a big proponent of teaching everyone how to use their entire system, not just their forward-facing sonar system.
I thought it was very important when you mentioned that with the trickle down effect. Bass, and I said this last night, and I'll stick to it. They're the leaders in this thing. What they do, the rules they make, the decisions they make, everyone else seems to eventually follow. It's just, Ray was the first show in town, Scott.
Yeah,
that was funny how that worked. Ray was the first touted. Ray Scott. But when that press release dropped, and there are lines in it like, quote, while live sonar technology will remain a consistent tool used by the very highest level of competitive bass fishing, and they allowed the one transducer, to me, that clearly states that the industry leader that has been followed for the past half century is saying there's a place in our game for this. That's got to be good news for companies like the Bass Tank.
Yeah, and this is again taking my personal opinions. I'm not against anybody. Like I said, I'm not throwing shade at Brad's for him making a business decision to ban it. My opinion falls more aligned with limitation. I have a lot more of this standpoint. Again, that's just my personal opinions and what I see, because the way I see it from my standpoint as a company is it was getting pretty insane with what the pros were running. 5 live transducers. How do I sell that? How do I tell my customers? Because think about fishing. How many sports out there with a professional level can you actually start at the bottom? Period. Yeah, I'm not super athletic. I can't throw a football 80 yards. I can't run a 4.40. I can't hit a baseball 400 feet. I can't throw 100 miles an hour. Those are just natural God-given talents. And yes, you've got to work on your craft and things like that to perfect them. But fishing, there's nobody that's going to restrict you. And if people say, "Oh, we got to have money," well, that's true. But there's nothing out there that you don't have to have some money. But at the same time, I promise you this: if you can go catch fish, you'll find the money, because companies will find you. If there's a guy that's constantly in every
look at Hamner,
look, Hamner's a prime example. And so, you can make it my neighbor can go make it if that is their desire and they sell out to do it. And so that is what makes our sport unique, I think, from that aspect, because the everyday person can do it. There is a path for it. But then what happens is when this everyday person is sitting here and they say, hey, I've got to have 6 graphs and 5 live transducers on my boat. All of a sudden, you've got to have 20 grand worth of electronics. That's where it starts becoming the separation. Now, I'm not saying there can't be a little bit of separation between the professional level and the average everyday weekend angler, because you're doing your living. I'm okay with that. But it was getting so far out there, it was almost unattainable. And as an industry, I think we were starting to disconnect from our customer base. I was seeing it every day, and so I like to kind of, let's draw this back in a little bit. Let's make the pros more relatable, where this is a more attainable goal, because I do believe that helps with the audience and the fandom side of things, that it makes it more relatable. That's just my take. Again, I may be wrong. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, you own a business that sells this stuff. So here's what I'm hearing. So you would rather have, let's just go with the bass limitations right here. 1 forward-facing transducer, 55 inches of screen. Your thought process, or based on what you've seen, when you had, I've seen some of the boats that have come through the Bass Tank over the years, and I've literally sat back there. I mean, dude, from the beginning of the Bass Tank, when it was formed, I've sat back there with the guys, and there's an Elite Series or a NPFL or a FLW or MLF guy's boat in there, and you've got 4 people around it, and you guys do this for a living, and you're scratching your heads, and you're all looking at it, and they're like, well, he wants 6 batteries, and he wants 2 transducers back here, and we have to order this turret here, and he wants 2 up here, and you're sitting there and you're going, this is why, we have to really figure out how the hell we're going to put all this stuff on here. So that being said, what the goal is, ideally, is for that pro to leave a non-professional angler or an aspiring professional angler or a hardcore weekend angler is going to look at that and come in and say, I want that setup. But that setup retail is $46,000. So when they actually go through that process, they're going to go, screw that. I'm just going to stick with what I got. There's no way I could do that. But when you talk about relatability, you're talking about, 1 transducer, 2 12-inch graphs, $8 grand. Yeah, I can do that. So they're more likely to actually spend more money on less and spend less money when there's more. Is that the basic gist of it in theory?
I mean, not necessarily just that, but we talked about Austin when I was on the boat with him earlier. You talk about a guy that's simple. He's got 1 graphic console and 1 at the bow that's networked to it for mapping and waypoints. And he's got 1 live scope unit. He's running 3 units, and he's competing in the opens and doing pretty dang good. And it's kind of that, when I'm talking to my customers, I get some customers, and they start spinning out, and they're like, and this, and then I might want to add this, I want to add this. And I'm like, why? Let's do this. Let's master what we have. Let's master the simplicity of it. It takes money out of my pocket, but I'm not going to say I don't care, but I'm more interested in someone learning to catch fish and them realizing that Scott's not there to take advantage of them. Scott's there to help them catch fish. And that's where the relatability comes in from. If I say, hey, this is what X is running, because you do get that. You're like, hey, I saw so-and-so was running this. I do want that thing. But instead of saying, I want their entire setup, they say, I saw this one little piece of this. How do I get that one piece of it? Now I think it's going to be a little bit easier for them to say, hey, I want Justin Hamner's setup. I want the Bassmaster Classic champion setup. And again, it's still expensive. All of this is expensive. It's never not been expensive. It's just getting worse. And now I think this helps to dial it back in a little bit more.
Interesting. And this coming from a guy who does electronics for a living. So the sky is not falling.
No, I don't think it is. Like I said, kind of jump back over to NPFL. I think it's really interesting. I really do, but again, my everyday customer is not an aspiring NPFL fisherman, or, they're not on that trail. And that's because there's I think 118 is what the field is this year. That's 118
That'll be
people that this immediately affects. And the next year the roster, I'm sure there's going to be some additions and subtractions, because every angler has to go look how this affects them. Because if you're going to fish something at the level of the NPFL or the Opens, PPT or the Elite Series, you're looking at this as some sort of a business venture. There's you're trying to make somewhat of a living at this. And so you've got to look at how it affects your business. Just like Brad said that he made a business decision, the anglers have to make a business decision. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, that doesn't really affect me, because my everyday customer is not a tournament angler, believe it or not. Yeah, I have a fair amount. I have quite a few that fish weekend, tournaments, things like that. But the majority of my guys, the majority of my customers are just people who want to go catch fish. And where I think it's going to affect me more is if with Bass making their limitation, if all of a sudden at the Opens and then Bass Nation, and they do an all-out ban, or let's say the BFLs, decide if they're going to do an all-out ban. That's where you're going to see a lot more. And I'm going to say, okay, this will affect my bottom line at the end of the day. But it's still at the same time, I'm not going to freak out about it, because guys are still going to buy electronics.
How are they finding out about this stuff? You said before the majority. You said the majority of your guys are not tournament anglers that come in and they want. How do they find out about? Are they other species anglers? Do they just follow tournaments and not fish about it, or how are they finding out about and coming in and saying, "Hey, I'd like this set up on the boat"? Because I mean, we live in a freaking very tiny bubble. Like I said last night, 1.3 billion, I think, with a B for the first quarter earnings for Garmin. Like a couple thousand live scope units. I mean, isn't even on their radar. But I'm curious on the average non-tournament guy who comes in, wants to put $10,000 to $15,000 of electronics on his boat, but isn't doing it with the thought process of, by God, now I'm going to go win it back and make money. Like, he knows that's just an expense for him to go out and catch fish.
I think I've shared this before, and I'll share it again. My demographic is in the 50 plus range. Like, I sell to all ages for sure, but the majority of my customers have been and continue to be 50 plus. These are guys that have probably done tournaments in the past and maybe are fed up with the competition just in general. Maybe just, hey, it's too much wear and tear on my body. I don't do that. And then they may fish the occasional jackpot or something like that. But at the end of the day, they're just like, I just want to set my boat up to go fish and whatever. And so, how do they hear about it? Well, they're still fishermen. They're still fishermen, and they probably, go look around and say, hey, what's new in fishing right now? And the internet's a great thing. I wonder, when side imaging came out, let's jump back to the original side imaging structure scan, the whole 9 yards. If the internet was as prevalent as it is today, would we have had the backlash with it? Because people would have freaked out because you couldn't hide a brush pile. Offshore fishing, up to that point, offshore fishing was a very, very difficult thing. But you didn't hear about it as much because, you're talking about 2008, 2009-ish ballpark.
It was 2004.
Has it been around that long? So 20 years?
Yeah, because I literally just did a deep dive into when different technologies hit the market, and then I tried to correlate tournament results and rise of anglers based on new technologies that were available. So 2004 is when it came out. 2005 is when it kind of became available to the public. Well, and then I think you're looking at, was it 2011 or something like that for the 360?
Yeah. And so to kind of put that into perspective, and the only reason I know this is because I get reminders all the time. I joined the Book of Faces back in 2009. And if most people looked when they originally joined, if they had Facebook, it was 2009. The reason why is because that's when Facebook kind of switched over to MySpace. I'm aging myself for there, by the way. There's people on this that do not.
Yeah, I got in college. Like, you had to be in college when I got in 2006.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been on Facebook in like 2 years now.
And that's the that's kind of when the I call the internet revolution really started just blowing up, and so even then, Facebook was not what it is today. And so you didn't have the social media presence that you have today. Would if let's take ourselves back now and pretend that forward facing sonar doesn't exist, and let's just talk about site imaging and structure scan and just place it right in the middle. So we're 4 years into it. Is there the same backlash? Probably not as much because it's not live, but at the same time, guys that have been dropping brush piles for years are pretty ticked off that all of a sudden they can't hide brush piles anymore because someone can just drive around and, oh man, they can find all my brush. That's just the first step. And that's where this is kind of an interesting, like you mentioned, Pandora's box. We have an issue with technology that's not going to change. Technology is going to continue to move forward. And I do believe there's a point. Everyone has a point where it's too much technology. Like I can't get on board with the augmented reality. I think it's really cool and I would want to test it, but I don't want to see it in tournaments. And that's my technological line for me personally.
The what? Augmented reality?
Yeah, like where they put the VR glasses on, or they have the heads-up display.
Oh yeah.
And mine is actually as much a safety issue because I've worn that stuff. And even though you can still see, your depth perception gets off, and then all of a sudden you're going to have guys start walking off boats or having boat accidents. And it's a personal opinion. It's a personal line for me. That's just me. I'll admit that it's a personal thing, and I can hear the arguments for it and against it, things like that. But everyone has that line. And a lot of people will use everything up to forward-facing sonar. And then they're like, nope, that's too far. That's too far. Live sonar is too far. Okay, that's fine. But let's call it what it is. It's just you saying, hey, I just don't, this is too much technology, not that there's actually a problem with it. The studies are showing that they're not harming the fish right now. And I am a data guy. If we see a report that shows data that says we are absolutely harming the fisheries, we definitely need to step back for preservation for the long term. But so far, there's been no data to support that. Quite the contrary. One thing that I think is very interesting is, I said this a long time ago. I said, if you took forward-facing sonar off my boat, would I be a better fisherman afterwards? And I still stand by my answer is yes, because it taught me fish behavior. There are things that we were told were absolutely, this is the truth. Forward-facing sonar, we found out that was absolutely not the truth. And I'm not saying anyone was a liar. It's just, this is what we thought. Well, then we found out that's just not true. I'll take I'll take a low-hanging fruit. Let's talk about wintertime fishing. For the longest time, we were told that the fish in the wintertime didn't move very far. They weren't very
drag active. A big jig on the bottom real slow, find the deepest part of the lake, get 2 or 3 bites a day. They all winter in the same spot. If you find them, they're grouped up, but they're lethargic. You can catch them on a jig and spoon and a big jig with a pork trailer, but don't expect aggressive bites.
Don't expect it. And I don't know what you found, but I found that to be blatantly false. And that's fish behavior, and so it's just one of those things where it has taught us a lot. And, and I say, look, I respect the guys that have done this for years without, going back pre-site imaging, pre-down scan, flashers. Like, you have to tip your cap to those guys because they cut their teeth. And I can understand them feeling a certain way about guys coming in and seemingly taking a shortcut. But I'm going to assure you right now that I'm 40 years old and there's a younger generation that's even younger than, that's 30 or 20, and they're doing things. There's things available to them that weren't available to you and I when we were that age. Mm-hmm. And are we going to get mad about it, or are we going to say, well, that sucks that they're getting to take shortcuts?
Listen,
you know what? I'm just going to jump on the train.
Okay, you mentioned that. That's interesting. So I got the press release right here, and I didn't get into this last night because 4.5 hours.
Hang on, let me sit down.
And I just was like herding cats. Everyone was really well behaved last night too. I was really impressed with that. So I mentioned that this bothered me because I feel like Bass in this press release put some language in here that undermines what these young anglers have done over the past couple years. Now, let me know if I'm being too sensitive on this, but I want to read it and I want to get your take and see if it be, because I feel like there's some undercurrents here that marginalizes what has happened over the last 2 years. So this is the paragraph. Lastly, Bass will focus on a more diverse elite series schedule, creating a wide variety of fishing styles demanded for success. While live sonar technology will remain a consistent tool used at the very highest level of competitive bass fishing, experience and a deep-seated understanding of fish behavior, movements, and patterns will also be needed for success moving forward on the fishery scheduled. Am I reading too much into this, or is that saying, hey, we're still going to let you use LiveScope, but the way that we're doing this, we're basically saying in this statement that the guys who are using LiveScope don't have this understanding, and now the guys who do are going to have a shot again based on the scheduling. That's how I read that, Scott?
Yeah, and I read that, and I had to take a couple reads at it as well, because I think there's two ways you can read it. So I'm going to pull a Matt here and play devil's advocate. I think one way to read that is to say, hey, we're going to, in the vein of trying to preserve the sport and grow the sport, if you will, if that's a common term that's used, is we want to continue teaching people how to fish and understanding that all these things affect the way these fish move. But then there's the other side that says, I might have left that one out, because to some degree it's almost saying like, boy, this is going to be I'm going to get clickbaited for this one, but it's almost like saying if the guys can't compete, we're going to handicap everyone else so they can catch up. And I'm all about leveling the playing field as far as saying, hey, the limitations, this is what everyone can use. This is your limitations. Now it's anything outside of this is skill. But literally, and of course, I say that I wouldn't be opposed to a schedule that I don't know when they're going to release the schedule, but I wouldn't be opposed to, event one is a scoping lake, event two is a flipping lake. That'd be fun. That'd kind of be a happy compromise, just because, again, I remember I sell electronics and I still enjoy turning my forward-facing sonar off and going fishing grass and flipping, frogging. I still enjoy that 100%. And I think I want to believe that they're trying to keep the love of fishing, that pure side of fishing, of where we all started on the bank, on a creek bank or on a pond bank. I want to believe that that's what they're trying to preserve.
But what if we didn't all start on the creek or the pond bank? And what if we started off in high school 8 years ago with one of these fantastic high school programs that was designed to build anglers that could have success at the top level? And then you go to the college level, and then you go to the Bassmaster EQs and you prove it over the top 9. And now you've literally done everything Bassmaster has ever told you to do, from the juniors to the high school, to the college, to the EQs, to the elite series. And now you're catching them too good, but you started out with the technology and you don't know any different. So for our creek and bank and that deal is there going, hey, I've been using this since I was 13, and my core memory of bass fishing is watching the 7-pounder swim off of the stump and smoke my Nico.
Yeah, well, and that's where I made the comment of taking the shortcuts, and I don't mean an actual shortcut. I'm just saying there was a shorter path than what some of the older guys. Like I said, even my age, I look at things. Go ahead.
No, I feel the same thing happened one paragraph later in a Chase Anderson quote. He says, our goal was to ensure a level playing field that both embraces the value of hard work and experience on the water, as well as new technologies that will continue to improve angler success. So to me, he's also there marginalizing the success of these young anglers, saying, hey, we have to get back to where the success is based on hard work and experience. And that hasn't been happening. So we're going to try to return to that.
Yeah.
Am I being way too sensitive on this?
All right, here we go. You pulled me down the rabbit hole. Here you go, Matt. There's a
We got
couple
about
things
like
that
10
I
minutes
saw in the
because
press
you have to
release
get
that
on the road and go
okay,
ahead.
okay. There's a couple things in that press release. I'll just be honest with you. I just don't understand. I don't understand how they came to that conclusion. So, and I'm gonna start with they mentioned the saltwater transducer. They said 1,000 feet. Whoever made that statement does not know what they're talking about. I'm sorry, they don't. Because if they're referring to the Garmin XR62, LVS 62, that is literally deep water trout. And it's not, you can't run that at 1,000 feet. I'm sorry, you can't. So if this is the decisions they're relying on, they've got some bad information. I also don't understand the brake side of things. I'll just tell you, I don't understand it. I don't understand why they decided to ban that.
I'll tell you why.
I don't get it. You know, like,
there has been a rise in the use of electric motors mounted to shallow water anchors, which makes enforcement of current rules like long lining and strolling very difficult. That's why they banned it, based on the press release.
So what happens when a company comes out with brakes that enable anchoring the back of the boat, spot locking the back of the boat?
It's illegal. Can't use it now.
That's where I struggle. You know, like, okay, then what? Okay, cool. We've ripped open Pandora's box. How are we going to continue to allow sight fishing? Because there's so much controversy around sight fishing of whether it was hooked in the mouth, not in the mouth, snagged, whatever. And so now you're going after, well, you don't need shallow water anchors because you shouldn't be able to anchor the boat. You know,
it was easy to go after, Scott. It was easy to go after. Yeah. There weren't that many proponents of it. Didn't bring in any money for Bassmaster or BASS. Placated a couple people who didn't want it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Mike said, what if they aren't electric? There's only one electric motor mounted to their boats. Is there any way to do propulsion without electricity?
I mean, your gas powered big motor.
Can't do that because you can only have like one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, there's always a way.
You could put a generator on the boat. Oh, you could run them off of a generator, a gas powered generator.
I mean, I could create hydraulic.
But they're still electric motors.
Well, no, they're not. They would be turbines that were hydraulically powered, that the fluid would be powered by an electric motor. Okay, but that's not actually powering the props. I mean, there's ways around it. And listen, if this has taught us nothing, it's that guys will push that envelope until they're told no. Right? I mean, I'm not, look, but would you not? I mean, you know, when the first time you can use a 7-foot rod or an 8-foot rod, the guy's going to use an 8-foot rod. You know, I mean, guys are always going to find ways to create that, what they feel is a competitive advantage. And that opens up a whole other set of worms, you know, like, you know, we can literally sit and talk about this all day long, you know, as you know. At the end of the day, I've got my personal opinions. From a business standpoint, you know, I don't see that this being a negative thing. I'm kind of excited to see where it goes. You know, I'm curious. Talk to me in a year. Talk to me 2 years from now when we start seeing a trickle down effect. And I think Brad would even probably tell you, hey, talk to me in a year, see if this was the right decision or not. But you know, one thing about Brad, I don't know how well you know him or not, but he and I have had several conversations. But one thing about Brad is when he makes a decision, he's going to stand behind it, and he's got with conviction. And you've got to respect that. Whether I agree with the decision or not is irrelevant. Brad is going to stand behind this and with conviction. So he's going to see this through. And so it'll be really fun to kind of sit back and see how this plays out. Because there are a lot of people that make a lot of noise on the internet about forward-facing sonar not being real efficient. And okay, so go support the NPFL. Do that. You guys need to be the biggest supporters and show them that this was the right decision. I'll tell you that. From a bass standpoint, I like the limitation just because it was getting so ridiculous, in my opinion. You know, like I would have liked to have seen 2 transducers because I see the fun. Because if you're not going to I don't understand why 360 wasn't, unless they just really said, no, it has to be live.
That's what
360
they
is a
said.
semi-live, and so, but again, now we're splitting
Like
hairs
Jeffries
as
also
to
said,
where's,
business, money, business decision. We'll never know exactly
yep,
how much that played into it.
100%, and that's for him to do. And so, at the end of the day, from a business standpoint, I don't really see any major negative effects of it whatsoever. Now, when some of these other trails, I don't know how many more. Like you said, at some point, MLF is probably going to make their decision and announce that. And how far down does that go when it reaches the local level? And which
That's
is a
when it
big
gets
question for
scary.
me. Like, let's talk about, say, BFLs. That's a very popular trail. If all of a sudden they said the BFL does ban forward-facing sonar, and there's a lot of guys that have forward-facing sonar on the boats, how are they going to enforce it? Are they going to tell guys they physically can't have it on their boats? Because you're going to lose a lot of boaters, because guys aren't going to de-rig their boats every time they have a BFL, because they're going to use it when they're not fishing that tournament.
When you come
So,
in,
I mean, it's
Scott.
yeah. Well, and I've got some ideas. Don't get me wrong. I'm definitely working on ideas from that standpoint. I know the NPFL, it sounds like they're going to have a cable lock, where basically they lock the transducer cable, and then basically they give back the lock after it's over. I think it's maybe what it was floated out, something like that. Okay, cool. But you're going to have a bunch of BFL guys, or the BFL is going to provide that. I mean, enforcement becomes a nightmare on a lower level, in my opinion. But it'll be curious. It's a wait and see. Don't freak out. Again, yes, I sell forward-facing sonar transducers, 100%. But guess what? I also sell map cards, and I sell mounts, and I sell mapping units and side imaging units. I sell shallow water anchors. I sell it all. So that's just one product that may be affected, but even for the short term, I don't see it being affected, honestly.
The other thing that you know a lot about, and you and I have spent a lot of time on this. I got my butt kicked big time by perspective mode first thing this year. And I mean, we literally went out to the lake where you were sitting with settings. I'd pitch 20 feet out in front of the boat. I go, can't see it. You'd go and pitch out. I mean, we dialed it in. James Hall did an article that kind of goes in coordination with this press release James Hall had on last night on the tech committee. Editor Chief Bass. He had a new title. What was his new title? VP of Content. It said many anglers had two live scope transducers on their trolling motor shaft, one in forward mode, one in perspective mode to cover more water. Now anglers can use one or the other, again, putting guardrails on how the technology is implemented. I get it. I understand it. No controversy here. My question is, will there not just be something that makes it easier to put it from forward to perspective, and now it's just going to be more of a pain in the ass than it was before?
Well, and that's what it boils down to, because there's already mounts out there that make it. Just the factory mounts are not hard to flip back and forth.
For someone who's kind of special ed like me, I'm a little nervous to do that Derby day once I have it dialed in.
Yeah, I understand, but you're going to see one thing in this industry, like I said, has taught me is every time a rule is made, there's somebody comes up with something to still adhere to that rule, but to make that rule easier to adhere to. Forward-facing sonar sparked a whole different segment of the industry. That's just what it does. And you've got different graphs and mounts, things like that. So yeah, there's something will come out that makes it like crazy. And like I said, there's already things that are very, very easy, and it's not whatever. It's just more annoying to the angler at this point to do it. So, and that's like I said, they would have asked my opinion, and nobody did, and nobody will. But I would say limit it to two forward-facing sonar transducers, but both of them have to be, one must remain in perspective, and one must remain in forward, because right now, what prevents someone from putting a 360 up there to get their perspective and using forward for the other, right? I don't see where that says that those can't be used in conjunction. Now, guys with sponsorships, okay, if you're sponsored by Garmin, you're not going to get to use a 360. I don't think, but so I get, but at the same time, cool. Like it's at the end of the day, they made the rules like we at least know what the guardrails are, right? And that's been part of it. Is what's the question? What is it? We've got guys that I'm working with for the 25 season that are kind of like, Scott, I don't know yet because I don't know what we can and can't do yet. And so this always gives guys what now they do. Now the question is, what about the opens? Like when is that?
And I asked about that, and they said they're going to work down that and eventually handle that situation. That it is on the table, but it has not. But I gotta get one more lick in because the more I read, I just found a new article. The more I read, the more I realize this is the most hypocritical crock of crap I've ever seen. So Chad Gay's been in the industry for a long time. Used to do all the PR for FLW. Now he's writing for Bass. He kind of does a well-written article on the different things that, rules that have taken place over the year.
Yeah.
I still cannot wrap my head around this brakes thing. It is this is the most single hypocritical sentence I have ever heard in the history of bass fishing. This is embarrassing, Scott. Like, really, it's 7:45 in the morning. I just read this while you were talking on the last. Fired me the hell up. Elite competitors may not only have one electric motor mounted on the boat. The new standardization will eliminate the challenges of rules enforcement. Yeah, we've heard that. While requiring anglers to demonstrate more boat control skill with a single electric motor. Hello, spot lock. Hello, power poles. What the hell?
Yeah. That.
What are you? Like, what world are you living in?
That's where like I said, I read the press release and there were some things that just kind of made me raise my eyebrow, going, "Where did you get your information?"
Demonstrate more boat control skill with a single electric motor. Yeah. And the most heralded the two most heralded advances prior to forward-facing sonar in professional bass fishing were the spot lock feature and power poles. Guess what both of those did? Completely eliminated boat control skill. That was literally their job. That's what they're marketed for. That's what they've made tens of millions of dollars on, was eliminating boat control skill. Dude, I covered this thing when no one else it had power poles out there, and you've got a guy who was tying off to the back deck with a cleat, who had an anchor, who was looking based on what the wind direction was, and then had a pole that they were jamming through the trolling motor to get themselves angled just right so they could bed fish, and it was a skill. I watched Dean Rojas set it up, and I'm like, screw that. I'm just going to flip at it as I drive past it because I can't set up like that at all. Look at Brian Thrift without a spot lock into the wind. Literally the two biggest things. They were marketed as removing boat control skill.
Yeah. Well, so my other question is, and I haven't seen anything, but it says that the transducer has to be mounted to the trolling motor, but does that include turrets?
And that was a great question.
Mounted to the trolling motor.
But then
so what does that mean?
I did not hear the word directly to the trolling motor.
Yeah. Because the turrets are physically mounted to the trolling motor, so they still when deploy with it, but they operate independently. So that's the next question: is this a thing, or did you just kill a whole other segment of the industry?
Because with the brakes, they killed a segment of the industry.
They did. And so I think you and I talked about it at the beginning of the year. We're like, if this
you're damn right, it's biased, Bass Fanatic. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. It is 100% biased. Yes, it is biased.
Yeah. We said come next year, basically for 2025, we're going to see a spike in the brakes. And I was feeling that. I was seeing that. That is one thing that I do believe was impacted, more than forward facing sonar, like plain and simple. I think I'll say that maybe that's one thing that I expect brake sales to go down compared to forward facing sonar. I'll still sell forward facing sonar just like I'll sell side imaging, but my brake sales will go down because this is absolutely going to have a trickle down effect. And that's it's just very interesting. So.
Yeah, the turrets never have really caught on at the pro level. I mean, I know there's guys that run them, but as a whole, like you don't see a bunch of guys with turrets.
And the majority of the guys that run turrets have one. This is where the multi transducers mattered. They would still have one on the trolling motor, and then they would say, hey, when I'm in spot lock, when I'm anchored out there, I want to be able to independently operate. So they would have like 2 or 3. They would have one in forward, one in perspective, and then the independent turret. And so this is going to make a decision. There were several guys that we installed, turrets on for that, but they were running multiple transducers. So it'll be interesting. Guys are going to have to make decisions, guys at that level. And depending on the trickle down effect, everyone's going to have to make a decision on how many transducers they run and where they want to put it. Lucky for me, I've just always been a guy that just stuck on the trolling motor and away I went. That's just, I'd rather do it that way than mess with a turret personally. But also I see the use of it as well. So it'll be interesting.
You're excited.
Matt, I just want you to tell me how you really feel. I think I've struck a nerve with you. When you and I talked yesterday, we had a pretty spirited conversation. And, so there's a lot to take in.
Listen, it affects me professionally. It affects me personally on this. I also understand it is bass fishing. It's a first world problem. There are things to get legitimately fired up over that directly impact your life, your quality of life, family, and relationships. And trolling motors on your power poles is not something that I want to alienate myself from the organization that I have loved since I became a life member when I was 12 years old. But at the same time, I see nothing wrong with calling it out and saying this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I respect the committee. I respect their decisions. I was talking to one of them before and I said, listen, so you're going to have 100 different opinions and everyone's going to do and say what they think is best for them on their opinions.
Yeah.
And this is mine on it. And I think you guys got it 90% right. I think there is a lot of fluff in the press release. There's a lot of fluff in the press release. I said, but this one you got wrong 1000%. And he said, hey, this is open for discussion every year. It's not like, hey, never, but that one from the time I had heard that it was even on the table, it never made sense to me and it still doesn't make sense to me. And I think there were forces in play other than the true spirit of fair competition that led to that kind of random outside point for their number 2 ban on that thing. And that's what kind of pisses me off.
It does. Yeah, it does. Because it seems like it's out of place, right? It seems like it's out of place from just like, oh, by the way, we're also going to do this thing, whatever, from that standpoint. And so like I said, I scratched my head on that one. I did. I was like, what, really? Okay. I don't understand that. But, I totally get the forward-facing sonar decision, because has there been anything that has been so polarizing in our industry? Now I
don't think there has. The split was pretty polarizing. The MLF versus Bass back in the day was really polarizing.
Yeah, 100%. That was very polarizing, but that kind of settled out over time. This is something, guys that are against forward-facing sonar, I'm going to tell you something right now. You can get it banned at every tournament you want, but as long as it is legal, meaning the states, the conservation departments don't enforce some policy that restricts it or bans it, guys are going to continue running it. They'll stop fishing tournaments. That is real world data from my customer base and some surveys that I've done behind the scenes. I think I told you this, but I've done some surveys, and the overwhelming majority of people support the use of forward-facing sonar. It's not even close. And then if you take those people that support it and with a further question saying, if your local level weekend series tournaments ban the use of this, will you continue to support those trails? And the answer is emphatically no. 90% of those people say, I will just stop fishing tournaments because they don't want to screw with de-rigging their boats and things like that. Now, statistics are statistics, but I've got 4 separate surveys to support that across the entire country. I find that very interesting. And those aren't just my customers. Those are just anybody can answer that uses it. You have to at least know what it is. You had to have some answers to be able to, it couldn't just be some guy off the street that has no idea what forward-facing sonar is.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to be really interesting. But again, I kind of go back to the day and age of the internet. I believe that most of the guys that are using forward-facing sonar are just out fishing, having fun, and they're not feeling like they need to defend their position. There are people that feel like they need to, but the majority of people are just kind of like, whatever, I'm going to, tune out the noise, I'm going to go fishing. But the guys that just really hate it, for whatever reason, they're very, very passionate about it. They're about the hate. And I get it. They're saying, oh, it's not skill. Okay, prove it. Prove it to me. Put it on your boat and go win every event. And then tell me it's not skill. I fish with guys that their fishing ability is better than mine. I don't have a problem admitting it. But there are people that are better fishermen than me. Believe it or not, there are. And I get in the boat with them. They still struggle to catch fish. I'm like, okay, you wouldn't have, you did everything I would have done, and you even showed me a few things. I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that, and they still didn't catch them. I'm like, it's not just jump in the boat, and I get it. It's, oh, I want to break down this lake. If you're not breaking down the lake before you get there to know where you even start or where your next move might be, what are you doing? Yes, there are some bodies of water where you can drop the trolling motor and just cover the entire lake in a day to chase out, try to find every fish down. There's not a tournament on those bodies of water. There's not. Those are very small bodies of water. And those guys, you ban forward-facing sonar all you want, and those guys are still going to have forward-facing sonar because they're chasing those specific fish. So that's where it's just really interesting. It's such a complex issue over what seems like a simple issue, but it's not. It's very complex. And so, I don't know. Like I said, I've got my personal opinions. I enjoy it. I do like the limitations. I'm really curious and excited to watch what happens when the NPFL with a full-out ban. Now we've got some variety, right? Now we've got some variety to kind of see what tracks. If in 5 years NPFL supplants Bass because they did an all-out ban, you're going to look back and Brad's going to look like a genius. And now, let's be real. I think Brad would even tell you that would be tough to do just because of how long Bass has been doing it.
Who knows?
Right? But
who knows?
But
crazier stuff has happened.
Yes, it has. And so time is going to tell. Time is going to tell. And good on Brad for standing on his convictions of what he believes and wants to do. And let's let her eat. Good on Bass for at least making a decision whether I agree with it or not. I like the limitation. I think I may have more problem with a press release than I do the rules. Like I said, I still don't understand the breaks thing. Like I still scratch my head on that thing. I don't get it. But at the end of the day, press release could use less fluff. Just said, hey, this is the rule. We're putting guardrails up so this doesn't get out of hand. Bye. Like sometimes trying to be transparent, you kind of say too much and make it sound like you say too much instead of just saying, here's the thing. And I felt like that press release was kind of what that was. And that, again, that's my opinion. At the end of the day,
I also thought it was very clear to understand. I mean, we're nitpicking it. It wasn't easy for anybody of any organization to figure out what to do in this climate. So
at the end of the day, I'm glad I'm not the one that has to make that decision. It's easy for me to sit on my very comfortable couch and say, I can't believe you did this and shake my finger. But at the end of the day, there was probably a lot of things that we'll never know about that were discussed. And this was what they felt like was the best compromise. And I'm glad I'm not the guy that had to make that decision, And so, it's good talking points. And, at the end of the day, I'm going to continue to support Bass. I'll continue to support NPFL, as a fan, just as a fan of the game, as a fan of the sport, it is what it is, And so I'm not, we can have different opinions without people getting their all twisted and bent out of shape. And we're passionate about it. Again, Matt, if people don't think you're a passionate guy, this show indicates that you really are, because if you weren't passionate, you said it was first world problems, and you're right, it is, but at the same time, it's still something we're passionate about, and so if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to feel a certain way. There's going to be an emotional response, good and bad, to all of this. And it's fun, cool. It's in the middle of summer. The trails are winding down. You've got a couple opens left. gives us something to talk about, going into the fall.
It does.
The fall,
So you got to go pick up a boat, and I'm live with Frank in 29 minutes. So we got to wrap this up. We'll get
Uncle
you back
Frank.
in studio. You still got screen cleaner in stock? I talk about this stuff every time I'm on it. I'll hard sell the screen cleaner. I got 3 bottles of this stuff. If you're looking for it, it is a top-notch screen cleaner. Like it works on everything. It smells fantastic. If you carry this stuff in your boat and you want to clean your 55 inches of screen in 2025, you can clean a lot of 55 inches of screen with the Bass Take screen cleaner.
Yeah. And two things before I go, Matt. I heard you backstage. You did not give away the Justin Hamner signed hat that I gave you to give away. So I'll tell you what. I've still got a few held back. So please give that one away, and I will get you a new one that you can have. Okay, that's yours.
Okay.
Because I've held a couple back. So give that to a listener. And then obviously I'm going to take a page out of the Jeffries book here. And I'm going to have a shameless plug. We are running a back to school special right now on some swag, dude. It's like a dry bag, and it is chock full of some just goodies. And it's on the website right now. And it's got like an aluminum water bottle. I threw in some screen cleaner. It's a 10-liter dry bag. So what else did I throw in? I can't remember. I just started. There it is, right there. You see it. Some koozies, a floating keychain, a net gator. I even threw in some of my branded Velcro because you can just never not have enough of that stuff. So normally it's like $80, and I'm selling it for $30 right now because why not?
Velcro is a lifesaver. I use that Velcro for everything. I just get strips of the Velcro, and it works for so much stuff in the boot.
100%. So it's just it's been a pretty popular seller, and go get it, man, because it's I like it. I mean, I just buy it for the dry bag by itself. I was like, man, this is great. So anyway, Matt, I appreciate you having me on, man. And,
thanks, Scott. Drive safe. Congrats. Send me a pic of the new boat when you pick it up.
I will do it. We'll do it. Tell Uncle Frank I said hi.
I will. He's going to be fired up today, too. But we are talking fishing on Uncle Frank's show. Tips, tactics, techniques, all sorts of stuff. So, all right, this has been another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live. We'll see you, Scott. We'll be back with Uncle Frank. If you haven't listened to the show yesterday, we did 2 shows yesterday, 2 shows this morning. And we'll reboot and we'll rock it out. So we did an hour here. If we do an hour with Frank, that's 2. We did 5 last night. That's 7. That's 9 hours of streaming in the last 24. Trying a little content out there. This has been another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live. We'll talk to everyone later. See ya.